Welcome to another presentation from SR Snodgrass as part of our ongoing podcast series. I'm Lenore Seifer, the Director of Human Resources, and today I'm speaking with Chris Kreutzer. Chris is a principal in our Information Technology Services. Welcome to the podcast, Chris.
Thanks, Lenore. Thanks for having me on.
Excited to welcome you to the podcast. Can we start just by learning a little bit about you and what you do here at Snodgrass?
Absolutely. So far, I've been with the firm for about 15 years. I work in the Information Technology Department here. We do IT general controls audits. We also do attack and penetration tests, and then ICFR, financial report, year-end audits, which I'm involved in all of those for the firm. So a little bit of everything I get to do with our department, which is nice.
Some widespread areas within there with a lot of expertise, especially with that length of time that you've been here. So today, what are we going to talk about today?
I'm just going to cover some information security best practices that I think any company out there, regardless of your position within the company, could understand and try to implement within there. Whether you have an IT department, you work within an IT group, you serve a committee for management, or you're part of a managed service provider service, that just understanding different things that could help improve an environment for any company.
That's great to hear. So to be clear then, we're not just speaking IT technical jargon today then?
No, I'm going to try to keep it very layman's terms out there so anybody can understand. So we're not going to get super technical today.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Why is this important overall? Why are we talking about this today?
I think in the industry as a whole, regardless of whatever you work in, there's always security concerns. And it doesn't matter whether you're a financial institution, you're a retail shop, you work in manufacturing, you do some type of, construction, whatever the case may be, there's always an IT element involved with every company. So making sure your company is secure and well protected is a forefront for everybody, because you don't want your company's reputation to be exposed from something that you're not covering on the back end that may not necessarily be the service you're providing. So kind of sealing off that back door just to make sure that you can focus on your job as a front and doing whatever service you're willing to provide your clients.
And that's something we hear so frequently now, and so it really should be front of everybody's mind that has a business end to keep that information secure, because it can change quickly, as you had mentioned. So let's start talking about that then. Do we have some talking points today? What do you want to talk about regarding this?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I'll get into first is just about how automation's affecting environments, and just with the inclusion of artificial intelligence now, how that's changing the dynamic of environments and what people are expecting out of their IT and their security solutions, but what they may not realize what they still have to do as a company within their technology department, what their service providers may have to do at a manual level to make sure that things are working as intended for these automated processes so they can work efficiently and appropriately. I think one of the examples I'd start with is patch management and antivirus, which every PC and every server at every company should have. Each of these solutions, protects your endpoint workstations, your servers, to make sure that you're not going to get malware, you're not getting viruses, and you're not getting, ransomware at a baseline. But one of the things that gets covered with that process is just making sure that all the endpoints are protected. What we see a lot of times when we do audits for our institutions is finding out that we do a reconciliation of their environment over all their computer systems that they have versus what these platforms they utilize are, and they find that not all the machines are protected, where they may think we have different agents or solutions that automate this, we build this into our processes, and then you find out that they don't actually have those pieces identified, and you may have a handful of machines on your network that are actually exposed without you realizing it.
Is it because they think that it's more of a cookie cutter thing of I've gotten these ones covered, therefore these ones would be, or because they get new systems that they're adding? Why would something not have that in place?
So typically it's kind of what you said, that it's new machines they put in place, and they think through the build processes as they build it up. We have a standardized process. This includes doing these different checklists, but as with everything with the human element, you get busy, you get distracted. Your supervisor calls you and you're looking at, different elements they need that's more of a timely deadline, and maybe it gets overlooked. So one of the things we recommend with every company is do a reconciliation between those devices and your software solutions that you're utilizing to protect your environment, because otherwise you may encounter a situation where you have an employee who has a relatively new PC and they get a phishing email and the protection's not in place, then you're exposed to viruses, malware, and potentially ransomware.
That right there sounds key then. We can see what the outcome is of if it's not in place in the first place.
Absolutely.
That's good. So do we want to move on to another bullet point that you have here, another point for us?
So with that, I think another piece that's important too, which I get called about just in my personal life too, is regarding backups. So I get called just out of the blue from people I know, and they'll say, I have a friend that I know, their company's, thinks they have ransomware that's impacted their environment. What should we do? And it basically turns into, does your company have backups? A lot of, well built up companies do, but smaller companies may not, or they may not realize the necessity of it, or they may assume that they have it in place and they really don't, because they think it's a Microsoft built-in component that they may have not turned on, or they've not purchased, the additional components they need for the backup. So I would recommend reviewing your backup solution to make sure all of your servers at your company are included within the backups, and potentially any PCs too, because depending on what you do, if you're maybe in construction, you may not have it all in your server. You may have a PC where you're building out designs, and if your PC is infected and it's not backed up, you may lose your designs that you have in that process. So identifying your environment, determining where your key data is located, and making sure not only is your information backed up, but it's backed up either with an air gap or immutably that can't be modified by ransomware is key to make sure that you're not exposed and potentially stuck with either paying a third-party group, or potentially having to rebuild from scratch.
Talk about a lot of lost time and resources and everything else at that point then too. So with backups, I'm guessing too, you're not telling them not only to ensure that they have backups in place, but probably also verifying then that the backups are actually occurring. Because I've heard of people say, like, I thought I was backing up to that point, or the backups somehow failed too.
Correct. Yeah. You're supposed to get notifications within your system to make sure your backups are working as intended. So if you don't have notifications set up, that's a first step. Go back and review that now. Make sure you are getting notified in some capacity. And if for some reason your solution doesn't have that, maybe you're still backing up to Drive and they can't send you an email, then set some kind of checklist up to go through at end of day or the following morning to verify your backup completed like it's supposed to. Otherwise, you may not realize you've not backed up potentially for a week or a couple weeks, if you're not receiving these notifications, and then you could be in trouble again.
Because oftentimes people don't realize it's not happening if they're not proactively checking until there's a problem and they're trying to rely on that type of.
A lot of times the checklists don't get built in place until either an event's happened, or if they have an audit, and then a company like us would come in and do work and we tell them that they don't have that process built out, which that time they identify it and then they'll make that change. But sometimes those procedures don't get built out in advance. So one of the second things I'd look at is any type of new elements you add to your environment would be considered reviewing those at the time of implementation to make sure your existing policies and procedures, your group policies, your security policies are rolling over to your new devices. So a common thing we're seeing right now is the movement from Windows 10 to Windows 11. And with those, making sure that your software solutions that you're utilizing are compatible with a newer version. Because sometimes those vendors do not certify the new technology, so it may take longer for implementation on those. And then potentially you're also exposing your systems again to vulnerabilities because you may not be able to implement all those technologies you're looking at. Or potentially you might have to look at a secondary solution, which may cost you more money than in the long run, because you may need to utilize two, one for your newer technologies and one for your older technologies.
So again, staying up to date with what's being implemented when ensuring the whole process then is also going through, that you have all of that in place so that it's not leading to too many open items there, too many open vulnerabilities.
Correct. Yeah.
That's a lot, and that sounds like a really important piece, especially with especially the Windows change. We know that that's really big right now. Are there other systems too then, like pretty much any system that they're implementing? Windows is just an example then.
Windows is an example, yeah. Another key one that I see that pretty much applies to any company is going to be a firewall. So periodically, whether your IT environment controls it or you go through a third party, is making sure that your firewall has the same type of rules in place that you may have had with your previous version. So you may switch providers from one company to another, and it's seeing, do we have something comparable between the two solutions that we can implement to make sure everything's covered, or do we need to investigate, is there potentially a different way to do this so we can restrict the information from getting out there, or the exposure we're going to seek or deal with during the process in identifying the new system? Because we've seen a lot of changes in the environment with providers for firewalls in the past 5 years, for instance.
That's interesting. And I'm sure that that's not going to change either.
No. There's a lot of things that change in IT. There's always a new, better solution out there that somebody sees that is always replacing something else. So yeah, that's constantly evolving.
The thing you can count on for sure. So what else do you recommend then? I think we've covered 3 points so far.
Yeah. Another one would be is if you do have a managed service provider, especially for your network, is to make sure that any new projects you implement, you're communicating with them, because sometimes it gets overlooked where you may implement a new technology that may not be directly impacting your network from that standpoint. They may manage your users and your security from that. But if you have a new application that you're going to deploy on your network, is making sure that they're aware of it. That way, too, they can make any security adjustments they need to in case, their virus solution identifies that, this is a malicious piece that you have out here. So they may have to make an exception to build into your network. But a lot of times those type of changes don't necessarily get passed along to the MSPs because it's not something that's directly involving them. So any type of new project you have, just make sure you communicate with your network service provider over that.
So communication is key right there.
Absolutely.
Let's pick up on that. And I'm guessing part of that is because what the MSP is doing then, they might have different controls than what the client is actually says is important too for automation and checking and making sure certain things are checked or turned on, so to speak. Is that kind of?
That's correct. Yes, they have different controls that they'll put in place where when you look at the environment and seeing what you as a group within your company, because typically there is still a representative that has at least some level of IT function that they perform for the company. They may be doing some different services that you would be doing for your environment, and making sure that everything works in tandem with that, so nothing gets exposed or nothing, would shut off or start giving you a bunch of errors, and then people who outside of IT start getting notifications that they can't get into something, and then all of a sudden you're down for several hours because your software is not working as intended. Which
again, so much of it is to help improve efficiencies, and that's a big way that kind of works against that.
Absolutely. One of the other things related to MSPs I'd get into too is if there's any reporting they provide you just regarding patching or any alerts, any rogue detection things that they identify, potential threat detectors out there. Make sure you're getting reports from them and periodically reviewing them. You may not fully understand everything on there, but getting something to identify, are we seeing activity? Because if you get a report and there's no activity consistently, that should also raise a question as to why do I not see anything that's being provided on this report. So that way, it's ultimately your environment, and you got to make sure that you're protecting your environment. And even if you don't fully understand everything, that lets you ask the question then too of, are we getting all of the data? Is there anything further that we need to look at? Any changes that we need to implement within our environment too to further enhance our security, which, budgets do come into play with that, but there are practical workarounds for almost everything.
Absolutely. So what other recommendations do you have?
I think one of the other things too, just from an employee standpoint, I'd look at is just making sure all of employees are included within security training. It's one of those easily overlooked things, but even me as an IT professional within our organization, I'm included within the security training. So I don't think there should be any exceptions with that. There's always different things that can be learned from things within training, different modules that even to this day I look at and go, oh, I didn't know that existed out there, because different companies have different perspectives. They see different things, in the environment. So there's always something new to learn. So regardless of your profession within the company, you may work, strictly in the back office and may not think, you have any interaction with any of the customers or clients on the front end facing aspect. You're still just as likely, if not more likely, to potentially be attacked too, because you may be tied in with a higher profile type position where, if you're an executive secretary to the CEO, you could just be much of a target as they are because they know you're in constant communication.
So do we have some best practices for everybody with that? I mean, I'm guessing part of it too is as soon as someone's hired, you want to start making sure that there's not a lot of lag time between start date and helping to ensure that they understand your security policies, best practices, guidelines, and starting to ensure some training happens.
Correct. Within that, we recommend typically within 30 days that any new hire is educated within security, security awareness, best practices, acceptable internet and email use. This is like some baseline items, and then kind of go from there. Another thing I would look at too is on an annual basis, if not more often, depending on your security practices. Look at your training you're providing to your existing employees, making sure that you have diversified topics and you're not necessarily covering the same presentation that was covered last year, because they may tune you out. So trying to reflect that by updating with new stuff that's impacting environments out there, different things to see, so that way it's a refresher and people have something new that's involved that they may not realize, because the threat actors out there are constantly updating their attacks, so everything changes. So you may see one type of attack, 1 year, and then the type of presentation they put out the following year is totally different. And even within, a couple months, especially around the holiday season, it definitely seems like everything kicks up because of all the product deliveries out there. So
Yep.
things are changing.
The online shopping and everything else.
Correct.
So I'm guessing, too, that even though we want to make sure people are enrolled and going through training, there needs to be a tracking component to this as well.
Absolutely.
To ensure that they're not only completing it, but I'm guessing you want to look at the results of the training, too.
Yeah, with that, obviously, you don't want anybody to fail the exercise. I know there's going to be, a certain threshold, whether it's something set within management level, if you're doing it in person, your own quiz, or if it's something that's online, dictated with that. But you want to make sure everybody's taking that and passing that, and it's being tracked. Similar to the same thing I mentioned with the virus and patching inventories earlier. You want to make sure that, one, everybody's signed up, so you need to do a reconciliation between your company directory and then what you have registered in the online solutions, because we do run into that too, where not everybody's registered. So it's not that the employee may have failed it or ignored the training. They may have just never been signed up for it to begin with. So reviewing those periodically is a good starting point to make sure everybody's taking the training, and then 2, reviewing the results and seeing if there's any follow-up training they need to do in the event they fail the test or have too many failed, repeated attempts at the test to see is there something else we need to look at.
So all of these kind of seem to, the common thread that I'm hearing is a lot about documentation.
Ties into my last point just from looking at that. With an IT professional, whether it's somebody who may be out for vacation, for a couple weeks, maybe somebody's on medical leave. More importantly, if you've got an employee who's getting close to retiring, or you're doing some restructuring, adding some new employees, and then you have some diversification where everything's been done by a small group of people and you may have a new individual doing it. Documenting procedures over what some of the day-to-day is makes everything more efficient, not only for the new entry person that'd be coming in to replace somebody, adding to the group or changing a component of it, but also just for the manager or the person who was previously doing it, so they don't have to answer as many questions all the time, because you have a document you can refer them back to. And the more detail you can put into that procedural standard is key too, because if you have screenshots, sometimes people are visual learners, and that's a big benefit to them, so they can know, okay, I go in this window and I'm on this page and I should be looking for this, and it helps with that process too. So anything you can do to cover that, I think, makes the process more efficient for everybody.
That's exactly what I was thinking, efficiency right there again.
Yep.
Something everybody's interested in improving, but also most employees don't want to just keep trying to struggle to find the same thing to, when it's a repetitive task, or what am I looking at? Having it documented just really helps it out, so they can start working on other items too.
Absolutely. I think just in general, trying to make everybody's environment more efficient. Everybody's trying to always improve, streamline processes. I think IT is no exception there, and making sure that all those processes are documented is key to make sure things work as effectively as possible. Because like I said before, you never know when you're going to get a call from somebody who's having a fire that needs to put out immediately. So if you have to pass off responsibility to somebody else and they have something to work off of, it makes things much easier.
And it's overall, it sounds like, yes, efficiency is a good thing and we want to work towards that, but you're also trying to help reconciliation a lot, is what I've heard you mention too, to ensure that the safety and security is also there too. Don't just rely on the automation. Don't just think that it's still being done, but you got to be more proactive and a little more hands-on to ensure that your desired outcomes can be met then.
That's correct. I always tell people with anything when it comes to IT, it's ultimately your environment. You're responsible, whether you use a third party to perform some of your services or not. you can't blame them if something doesn't work right. You have to take accountability, because if you're subject to a breach or you have an issue, your client base is going to come after you. They're not going to worry about them. So you have to take personal responsibility for your own company to make sure that everything is working as intended. So being proactive throughout your security process is part of it, and having checks and balances to make sure things are working is absolutely key.
You're the owner of all that information and need to act like that part too to ensure that security of it.
Absolutely.
Chris, before we go, one of the other topics I'd like to kind of get your input on and hear your perspective is regarding AI. We recently had Jen Kreutzer from the PICPA on our podcast here, and it's an ongoing discussion. I'm guessing you're getting it from clients and learning a lot about it too. What do you want to tell us about that?
So with AI, it's one of these emerging technologies that you're not going to be able to ignore. It is the future for just about every industry, and it's evolving rapidly. Within the last 18 months to 2 years, that technology compared to where it's at now continues to jump by leaps and bounds. I get asked this regularly from our clients: what do you see out there in terms of AI? How should we proceed with utilizing AI? And I keep, at this point in time, just a fairly simple message to that. One, do not use ChatGPT professionally. It is a repository and does have information out there, so you're potentially exposing anything that is uploaded to that site to provide you information to risk that you could be compromised. Second is just simply the message should be: do not utilize any artificial intelligence that is not approved by your company. And from an IT security professional perspective, would be limiting access to those sites, to that solutions on your environment, by blocking a lot of that through like your content filtering and different solutions to make sure that employees aren't enticed to utilize that if that's not an authorized solution. So the other component I'd look at too is just making sure that you understand before you start utilizing any type of AI what the solution's fully capable of. You may utilize a component of it, there may be more to it, and there may be consequences within there too that you may not realize within your artificial intelligence solution that is more than to be desired. So definitely investigate those strongly before utilizing anything. They are very beneficial and can be very useful for efficiency purposes with your company, but definitely proceed with caution and understand, what your intent is with utilizing that.
I really appreciate hearing that, because what I'm hearing from you is a little bit of cautionary for good reasons, especially anything that's open platform or unauthorized use, but also not just saying stay away from it either. It has its place, and you just have to understand what that is and really what you're getting into overall too. Correct.
Yeah, it's gonna take the forefront of technology. Every aspect of technology will eventually probably have some AI component to it that'll be useful, but it's just understanding what you can do, make the most of it, and also make sure you limit your risk and exposure as much as possible while moving forward with it, because I think every company will eventually find a need for AI in some capacity, maybe multiple solutions depending on what you do, but definitely understanding it, to the best of your knowledge.
And it sounds like the points that we covered earlier in our discussion today could also be easily applied to AI.
Correct.
So hit rewind and rewatch those parts too.
Absolutely.
With that in mind. So if people want to get in touch with you and learn more, how can they do so?
So you can obviously reach us at the Snodgrass website to make sure, you can get in touch with our group as a whole. We're also on LinkedIn, so definitely reach out to the firm on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so if you'd like to reach out to me directly on there, you're more than welcome to do that, and I'll pass along any messages we have there. Try to answer everything I can for you, but I would say those are probably the 3 points of emphasis, I'd say, if you want to reach us.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us here today on the podcast. It was great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Lenore. I really appreciate the time.
At SR Snodgrass, we're always growing. We have offices in Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Ohio, and West Virginia. Whether you're entry level, senior level, or somewhere in between, we invite you to check us out. Go to our website at www.srsnodgrass.com, follow us on LinkedIn, and join us on our quest for the best.